What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So Colby Covington has gotten to a point of not only delusion, but I think desperation and a little bit of chaos mixed in there. No pun intended, his name being Colby Chaos Covington. The way he is thinking about his career now is exactly that, chaotic. And I think that he's at a point where he doesn't know where to go. I think the UFC is at a point where they're not sure what to do with him because let's be honest, whether you love him or hate him, whether you think he's a good fighter or not a good fighter, Colby Covington has a huge name, and his name is very synonymous with the UFC, with Dana White, and even our president-elect, Donald Trump. So if you think for 1 second that Colby Covington is not a big name or a household name, you are just a hater, and you are mistaken because he is. But when the UFC has that sort of commodity, they have to figure out the best use for that commodity to bring them the biggest revenue stream possible. The problem is he's been losing. He's been doing nothing but losing. Since 2019, Colby Covington has lost 4 out of his last 6. Granted, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's been fighting top guys, but he still lost 4 out of his last 6. So we're going to look at some videos of him on his interview with Submission Radio recently, and we're just going to react to a few things because Colby, his slip is showing, as they say. The persona's not really working anymore. People aren't really buying it anymore. People were buying it when he was winning or when he was giving good fights against Kamaru Usman. Now that he's constantly losing, people aren't buying the gimmick anymore. Colby is speaking out of both sides of his mouth, which makes it even worse, and we're going to discuss some of that. So the first clip we're going to look at is where he's addressing the Dustin Poirier fight. You know, Dustin has hinted that he wants to retire, but now more recently, Dana has spoken about the fact that Dustin does want to do one more thing in the UFC before he leaves, and we're going to talk a little bit about that after we watch this clip right here. So check it out.
He's trying to lock in this fight. You haven't heard anything from the UFC about you versus Dustin. I know that's the fight that people want to see, you versus Dustin. Nothing.
Yeah, nothing. The UFC offered it. They were even willing to double his paycheck.
He's already gotten off to a silly start there. Why would Dustin Poirier need his paycheck doubled? Dustin Poirier has challenged for the title multiple times. He had the 2 fights with Conor McGregor, which were absolutely huge paydays for him. And then another title shot recently against Islam. Dustin is very, very well paid. And I'm sure at this point in his career, he is not concerned about money.
You know what? He can go into retirement knowing that he's my little bitch. And every time we trained together, I knew I fucking beat his ass.
So it just kind of shows the reaching and the desperation for an almost 37-year-old Colby Covington who's been losing, recently because, he talks about later on how he doesn't want to weight bully, so he'll likely not go down to lightweight. Yet 20 minutes earlier in the interview, he's calling out a lightweight in Dustin Poirier. Now, I know, granted, they could always say they could fight at 170, but still, Dustin is a lightweight sized guy. I mean, he cuts weight to lightweight. He's a smaller individual than Colby Covington, who's 5'11". Plus, you hear right there, he knows that I used to whoop his ass and train it. Now, listen, here's the thing. If they stood in the pocket in a boxing match, I would say 1,000% of the time, Dustin's going to win that fight. But I do concede to the fact, and I can see that there's a world where Colby Covington, being the bigger guy and the stronger wrestler, stunts all of the offense of Dustin Poirier, pushing him up against the fence, not letting him get off any of his own shots, and winning just by control alone. Okay, so I could see that happening. So what he's basically doing is he's calling out a lightweight, but then turning around 20 minutes later and saying he won't go down to lightweight because he doesn't want to be a weight bully. This just goes to show the chaos and the turmoil and the delusion, and it gets even worse.
So you used to help him with some of the behind the scenes stuff that people don't realize.
Oh yeah, people don't realize like when I got the interim title in 2019, I was giving him inside scoops on like negotiations and like contract and like around what type of money he should be making. He had no idea, dude. His
Mm.
management wasn't doing any right by him. So of course, he had to fight, 35 fights in the UFC. I fought 10 fights there and I was making more money than him. So, that's because I knew what I was doing. I knew the business and I knew what it took to sell in this company and how to make the UFC happy, which is ultimately, it's a relationship, it's a partnership with the UFC, you got to self brand and you got to sell yourself.
So I want you to remember the part there where he says you have to sell yourself, because this is going to be relative later on in the video.
So it is what it is. It's almost more rewarding for a guy to duck me and go into retirement without fighting me. That's worse than an L to me, in my opinion, because that was like you didn't even try. Like these guys that come out here, like George, Tyron Woodley, Robbie Lawler, Rafael dos Anjos, all these big names I've beaten. At least they tried. At least they tried.
So you notice there that he mentions Tyron Woodley, Jorge Masvidal, and Rafael dos Anjos. Those are the 3 wins that he has in his last 7 fights. You notice he doesn't mention any of the fights that he lost, right? Not to mention Rafael dos Anjos, that was forever ago. And dos Anjos was a great fighter at one time, but his time in the sun has been long gone. So he definitely beat a Rafael dos Anjos that was on the decline. Tyron Woodley, after he faced Colby Covington, that was just the beginning of his decline. It never got better for Tyron in the UFC after that. He literally lost every fight after that. It just continued to go like this. And then you got an aging Jorge Masvidal who has no grappling ability whatsoever, and he basically jock sniffed him to a victory, right? So he's grasping at straws. He's desperate. He's holding on to, only reminding the fans and the people of the wins that he did have, not reminding them, being careful not to remind them of the 4 losses that he's taken out of his last 6 fights.
So, I gave him all these inside scoops, and for him to turn his back on me and just start talking shit about me for no reason, it was shitty.
Listen, I'm not talking shit about Colby Covington. I'm one of those people that I've never stepped in an octagon in front of millions of people and fought another man, right? And I see people like, I was actually going to do this topic, and then I saw that MMA Joey beat me to it. I was like, damn it. But I'm not going to be like MMA Joey and sit there and just lambast and talk teetotal shit about Colby Covington when I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching his video, like, step your fat ass into the octagon. I've never seen your fat ass in an octagon. I'm just saying, I'm not going to do that because Colby has absolutely achieved things that I've never achieved. The most I've ever done is sparred in my local kickboxing gym. So, and that definitely wasn't against the world's most elite competition. So, how can I sit here and talk shit about Colby Covington? He's doing what he can. But the problem is, from a business and a fight perspective, he's kind of in a rock and a hard place. So he's talking out of both sides of his mouth here. So he's talking about Dustin, and then he turns around next and said he doesn't want to be a weight bully at lightweight. So check this out.
But would you ever move down to lightweight, man? Have you ever thought about that before it's all said and done?
Colby's thought about moving down to lightweight for many years, and Colby realized that he doesn't want to kill himself. He doesn't want to be a weight bully. Islam, these guys at lightweight, the Khabibs, of the world, they're little lightweight bullies. They have such a weight advantage, 30, 40 pounds on fight night, but it's just not healthy, man. It's not sustainable either. So, you cut all that weight, then you start having organ failure. I want to have a good quality of life. And I think about longevity. I think about my health in the next 10, 20, 30 years from now. So I start cutting weight like that. You're talking about really doing some harmful things to the body. So I don't see myself ever trying to go to 55, even though I know I could make it and I'd probably be way stronger than the guys on fight night. But I don't know. I feel like a bully, and I'm not a bully.
So you see, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth here, right? He doesn't want to be a weight bully. He doesn't want to go to lightweight because he's not a bully, and you can get organ failure and all the rest of it. It's not healthy. But he wants to call out guys who have fought their whole careers at featherweight, then lightweight. Dustin was at featherweight, then lightweight. Charles Oliveira, he called him out sometime last year. Charles Oliveira fought at featherweight earlier on in his career, then lightweight. So he's not a weight bully. He doesn't want to be a weight bully, but yet he's calling out people who are in general smaller individuals than he is, who fights at lightweight. He's getting desperate and looking at how can I possibly get a win here, because everybody in the top of the welterweight division more than likely is going to beat him. Dustin's a smaller guy, so he knows that he can probably overpower him, push him up against the fence, grab at his legs, jock sniff him to a control victory. Point remains, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth here, and it just shows the desperation. He's trying to find guys that have the name value that can match the name value of Colby Covington, but guys that he knows he can beat. So he doesn't want to be a weight bully, but he wants to fight lightweights. Doesn't even make sense. So it gets even worse. So this next clip, he's talking about moving up to middleweight, which I just think is downright silly. I mean, he just got his ass kicked by Joaquin Buckley, who was at middleweight and then came down to fight at welterweight, and he couldn't handle him. So I don't know what makes him think that he's going to have a shot at anybody at middleweight. I think Colby's just confused. So check out this one.
But 85, honestly, 85 is intriguing. I think it would be kind of cool to go up there with the narrative like, oh, this guy's a small 70. He's going to go up to 85 and take on an even bigger challenge.
Man, you and DDP, you and Strickland, you and Izzy. There's a lot of great fights there, actually, now that you mention it. And I guess the thing with lightweight is it's like, you know, you've kind of fought a lot of guys that are similar weight classes. Like Islam might move up into your division anyway, right? So it's kind of like, I don't know. There's a lot of fun fights at middleweight. Anyone like at middleweight specifically that you'd love to have a crack at, you reckon?
You know, I mean, the Sean Strickland fight's always interesting. You know, he's had his things to say about me in the past. I don't think he's anything special. He's got a jab, he's got a front kick, but besides that, you know, you shut those weapons down, and he's very limited. So, you know, he's a cardio fighter. He's just a cardio kickboxer, essentially. So, you know, I don't see any threats out of Sean Strickland, and it's an entertaining fight that I might entertain in the future. We'll see.
Listen, Dennis over there at Submission Radio, he's doing his job. You know, he's asking the questions. Colby's kind enough with his time to come on there. But again, I'm not going to do like MMA Joey and talk shit about Submission Radio because they bring on Colby Covington and ask him all the pertinent questions and seem like they're sucking up to him. Listen, Colby would never come back on the show if Dennis put him under the gun and said, well, you know, you've been kind of sucking lately. What do you think you're going to do next? I mean, how do you think that would benefit his YouTube channel? But that's what they do. They do fighter interviews, right? And he's still a current fighter interview on the roster. And whether you love the cringe, whether you love the persona, or whether you hate him, he's still a very big name in the UFC. But what Colby is trying to do here is still find a way to stay relevant, right? Because when you're giving good performances, people can kind of brush the cringe and the shit talk and the WWE persona up under the rug. But when you're not winning, and Colby has not been winning for quite a long time, people don't buy it. And it gets to a point where people are just like, oh, it's just the same old song and dance. I'm not going to tune in just to watch him yap, 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 and then turn around and not back any of it up. So that's where Colby is running into issues right here. And I think that's why he's reaching for and desperate to try to link his name with bigger names. Sean Strickland at middleweight, about to fight for a title again, guys. I mean, what in Colby's recent fight history gives him the qualifications to say that he could possibly go up and immediately, right out of the gate, fight a recent title holder and about to be again another title contender at middleweight? What world do we live in where Colby Covington should have the resume to be able to do this, right? You know, and I will say, I will point back to one part that he said earlier when he talked about how he shared with Dustin that, you know, you have to sell yourself. You have to, look, I'll give him credit for that. I'll give him credit for that. He actually, I agree with him. And I agree that he's really good at doing that, right? Colby Covington has talked his way into fights and matchups that he really didn't deserve on merit of his actual fighting. But so many people tune in and watch to not only hear the stuff that he's going to say, but there's haters out there who, when they hear him talk and they hear him yap, 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 they tune in to see if he's going to get his mouth shut, if he's going to lose, right? There's just as many people that want to see him get his mouth shut as there are people wanting to see him win and succeed, right? It's like the Jake Paul effect. Whether you love him or whether you hate him, both is good for business. Last one we're going to look at is, I'm not going to step on a story. Let me just play it, and then we're just all kind of going to laugh together. All right, so check it out.
You know who we forgot about? Hamzat. You and Hamzat. He might be UFC champion by the time you get up to that division. Bit of history there. Imagine that fight. That sells a lot of tickets, right?
That fight, yeah, that fight sells. You know, I wanted that fight for a long time. He ran from the fight. He couldn't make weight. He was just unprofessional, and you know, the guy was juicing. He quit. He guy was freaking retiring to the common cold. I'm not going to be afraid of someone who's retiring to the common cold. So, you know, I don't see anything serious about him. I know I can stop his takedowns, and then it becomes a striking fight. And I don't know if his cardio can hang for 5 rounds. We saw in the Gilbert fight how Gilbert really exposed his cardio. He doesn't have good cardio. If you can stuff those takedowns that first, second round and get him to deep waters, he's not that good of a fighter. So if he's able to get you down in that first takedown, that first minute or two, yeah, then he's dangerous because then he can implement his will on you. But if you can stuff those first couple takedowns, he becomes human and he becomes a very beatable guy.
Because I just want to say, I mean, there's no way in hell that Colby Covington beats DDP. There's no way in hell he beats Sean Strickland, Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whitaker. Colby beats none of those guys, right? So the fact that he's talking about going up to middleweight just shows the delusion and the chaos and the desperation of just, you know, trying to find names that are going to keep him relevant within the sport. This is the last clip. And I'm not going to step on the video, but we're going to watch it, and then we're basically just going to take a big fat dump on Colby's head. So check it out.
All right, final fan question here before I let you go, and I appreciate your time. How do you feel about Ian Gary? Someone's asking, on the same card, fighting on the same card as the Bilal Shafkat fight. You know, potentially under there because you'd be getting the next title shot with a win over Gary, I suppose. Like, what is the latest with Ian Gary? Because I know he didn't meet your requirements. You gave him some requirements. Is that it? Or because I know a lot of people are going, well, you know, it's still a great fight. We'd love to see it. But yeah.
The thing is, Dennis, is I gave Ian the most simple instructions. Just turn on your comments, man. Just have your wife send me a video. You know, it's not that hard. And if you believe you're going to beat me, you know, then agree that if I beat you, that you got to let her star in my next BC game, America's Pick of the Week video. So, you know, it's unfortunate. He couldn't follow simple instructions, but it makes sense. I mean, he's still, you know, he's a vegan from the nutritionist that's his wife's ex-husband. So that's a whole weird entanglement in itself. I mean, that show should be on Pornhub. That show shouldn't be on YouTube or Colby's Twitch channel. You know, why would I want this guy to be on my highlight reel? He's a nobody, Dennis. He's not a star. I said, hey, listen, I have the ability to get you this fight, Ian. You want this fight? Just follow these 3 simple instructions, 3 simple ideas. Just turn on your comments. It's not a big deal. He couldn't follow a basic simple instruction, so he doesn't get the fight. He doesn't have the power, Dennis, to be like, hey, I want the fight. Go to the UFC, make the fight. No, he doesn't have it. I have that power, and I could have done it, but he's not a star. He doesn't do anything for the Colby Chaos business. He's literally an absolute nobody. How did his pay-per-view numbers do his last thing? I don't even think they got 50,000 buys. So the guy's a nobody. I mean, he's a vegan. That's weird in itself. I mean, just what kind of advice are you getting from the ex-husband that used to dog out your wife? That's just weird. So, you know, the fight, you know, has passed. It's come and go. There's just no use for me in the fight. The guy's not a star. He's a nobody. I want big fights. I want stars.
So he goes into his whole spiel, his usual spiel, talking shit about Ian Gary, talking shit about Ian Gary's wife, the fact that the ex-husband is actually his nutritionist, and how can he give him the advice of not even eating meat? That's weird. The part about where he said it should be on Pornhub instead of YouTube, that part actually was kind of funny, I ain't gonna lie. But you're looking at a matchup that actually does fit right now, okay? Colby Covington has a big name, and here he is downplaying it as though Ian Gary's not a star and Ian Gary doesn't have a big name. You are full of shit. Ian Gary has a massive name worldwide, especially after his recent fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. Granted, he didn't win that fight, but he has a massive name. Okay. And really, if you look at the landscape of the welterweight division, that's really about the only fight that works right now for Colby Covington. I mean, you have Jeff Neal at number 10. Colby Covington's 9 right now. Number 8, Gilbert Burns. I don't think he beats Gilbert Burns. I think Gilbert Burns walks through Colby Covington, right? Before that, number 7, Ian Machado Gary. Before that, number 6 now, Joaquin Buckley. He just lost to Joaquin Buckley, right? I mean, who are you going to give him? Sean Brady walks through him. Jack Della Maddalena definitely walks through him. Kamaru Usman has already walked through him twice. Shavkat Rakhmonov, not even a chance. Colby beat Shavkat. So really, the only guy that even somewhat makes sense for him right now in that welterweight division is Ian Gary. And you heard him right there. Literally, right there. Oh, that's not blah blah blah. He's not a star. That chance has come and gone. And his wife and her ex-husband, his nutritionist used to dog out his wife. I mean, what the hell does that have to do with your fight career, bro? And it's one of those things where the talking's okay when you're also doing some good fighting. But now we're getting to a point where it's only the talking and he's getting his ass kicked by everybody, right? And, these fans aren't stupid. That's the problem. At one point, he was using this persona to his advantage. And plus, when he had the really good fights against Kamaru Usman, where he had a pretty good account of himself, people were believing it, right? But we're getting to a point now where it's like people aren't believing it, bro, because you're not winning. And then when you say something like, oh, Ian Gary's not a star, I only want big fights that are going to bring me, a lot of eyes, a lot of monetary value, you're full of shit. That's a huge fight. A huge fight. And do I think Colby Covington beats Ian Gary? No, I don't. I think Ian Gary beats Colby pretty handily, in fact. But it's still, you probably get your ass kicked less by Ian than you would some of these other guys, because you might be able to at least grab onto him and kind of slow his offense down just a little bit. Some of these other guys you're going to get murked by. And you're talking about going up to middleweight? You can't beat these guys in the top 10 at welterweight, Colby. So I just think, I'm one of those people that you don't talk about the problems unless you come with a solution. I have a solution. I think it's either two people. I think he either fights Ian Gary, you probably lose the fight, but you can probably slow him down enough to kind of make a good account of yourself. Ian Gary has a big name. Colby's playing it down as though Ian Gary doesn't have a big name because he knows that's not a winnable fight for him. Okay? But then he's calling out Dustin Poirier, who has a big name, because he's trained with him. He's a bigger guy than him. He knows Dustin doesn't have a great wrestling. He knows he can win that fight, or at least he feels like he can win that fight, right? But, any real fan these days who gives more than 2 seconds of thought to the sport is seeing through this. And I wish Colby would realize that fans are seeing through the gimmick at this point, right? And you need to stop with all the delusion, all the chaos, going here, then going there. He went all the way from the lightweight all the way up to middleweight, chatting about what his possibilities are. And none of the stuff he was talking about made sense. The only one that made sense was Ian Gary, and he said he wasn't going to take that fight. I don't know. Dana and Mick and all those guys need to sit down and have a conversation with Colby. It's like, hey, man, it's not working anymore. The gimmick's not working. Let's get you a fight that is winnable to you. Bring Michael Chandler up to 170. Michael Chandler has looked like shit recently. He's 5'8". He's a smaller guy than Colby Covington. I think Colby could probably grab hold of Michael Chandler and kind of, stunt his offense pretty well. He could probably get a decision win over Michael Chandler, if I'm being honest with you. Michael Chandler's got a big name. They're going to have to make some concessions somewhere, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get Colby somebody that he can beat, because Colby has a huge name. and they need to advance their revenue streams off of Colby's name. Okay, and when it comes to doing that, they can't just give him any old can, because then people are going to be like, oh, who's this guy they got Colby fighting? He's going to walk through this guy, and besides, who is this guy? What's his name again? That's not going to work. The fans are going to see right through that. Oh, they're giving this guy, this is the only guy that they think Colby can beat, right? They're going to have to give him someone that actually has some name value, right? But that they think he could possibly win. Now, listen, usually the UFC is okay with devaluing guys on their way out, right? But Colby's not on his way out. That's the problem. He's a UFC shill. He has said in public, and I'm sure in private, to Dana and Donald Trump and everybody else, that he'll never fight for any other organization. He is a UFC guy. He loves the company, what they've done for him, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's great. Listen, he's loyal, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if that's going to be the case with him, and they're going to treat him different in the sense that they don't really want to devalue him towards the end of his UFC run, like they do a lot of other guys that they know aren't going to re-sign contracts, you got to get him to a spot where he's actually winning some fights here. Okay? So to me, that means maybe having them fight at 170. I think he possibly beats like a Michael Chandler at 170. Michael Chandler had a big name in Bellator before it shut down. And he's got a big name in UFC now. So you're going to have to do something like that. If they can't talk him into taking an Ian Gary fight, it absolutely does make sense. I think it's silly that he's not taking that fight. And I guess what he's looking at is, a couple of losses in a row, 4 losses out of his last 6 fights. He's probably looking at it as though that's not really a winnable fight for him, and he's trying to get one that he can potentially win. But then out of the other side of his mouth, he's talking about going to middleweight. And he doesn't beat any of those top guys at middleweight. He doesn't beat Sean Strickland. There's no way he can believe what he is saying about, oh, he's only got a jab and a teep kick. Sean Strickland is 6'2". He is a humongous individual in comparison to Colby Covington, right? And even if Colby Covington does have better grappling, he's not going to be able to take Sean Strickland down and keep him there. There's no way in God's green earth. I just don't understand what Colby's doing right now. But anyway, that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoy the content. If you would, subscribe to the channel, hit that button right there, like the video, comment down below, let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think should be the next move for Colby? Appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next one. All right, peace.